Welcome to Inspire Campfire, a podcast where ordinary people tell their stories of extraordinary adventure. These are campfire stories meant to inspire the rest of us to light the fire within, get outside, follow our dreams, and return to tell our own stories. Ready? Let's strike the match.
Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Scott Wurzbacher, and today we're going to talk about what it means to be a diva. You heard that right. The word diva in Latin means goddess, and we're going to talk about goddesses. A diva can also be a stage celebrity who demands what she needs, and we're going there too. Today is about the empowerment of women with wilderness as their stage. And our guest is Aimee Cullwick from Carbondale, Colorado. Aimee is the founder of Downriver Divas, an organization that empowers women to experience the beauty and challenge of the outdoors through multi-day rafting excursions. Having spent recent years in a downturn of mommy martyrdom, taking care of everyone but herself, Aimee sought reawakening her wild side by leading multi-day river trips for women. With 20 plus years of experience as a raft guide and a kayaker, Aimee gypsied the globe after college, seeking river tribes through North, Central, South America, and New Zealand. As one of 4 sisters and mother to 3 daughters, Aimee was inspired to create a space to honor relationships among women where they can play, laugh, dance, and cry in a natural setting that inspires growth and connection. And she's here to share her story and the story of so many other women's lives that she's helped to transform. Aimee, welcome to the campfire.
Thanks, Scott. So fun to hear you read that.
Oh, I'm so excited. I told you before we started here, I've been kind of playing around on the website and watching your awesome promotional video and just learning more about what it is that you do. I would love if we could just start right there and tell us a little bit more about what you do and what Downriver Divas does.
Okay. Well, I would say that primarily I'm a caregiver to my 3 daughters who are 10, 15, and 17. And I think I mentioned this to you before in a conversation, Scott, that I've recently discovered that raising teenagers is something I want to be really present for, both physically and emotionally.
Yes.
And I've kind of come full circle with my parenting journey. And my husband and I are on the same page that we don't want to miss anything. So I love supporting my family. And actually part of that, I do want to role model for my daughters that they have something that gives back and something that connects to their values beyond the family. And so I created this retreat business, leading women on transformational multi-day whitewater rafting retreats in the summer.
I love it. Yeah. So let's go there. Can you tell us about this business and what it's all about?
Yeah. So Downriver Divas is really primarily multi-day. We don't do anything beyond that, but I've considered in the past integrating trips like in the Southern Hemisphere in the winter, but right now we operate in the summer. And I have one retreat this summer in August, which is on my favorite stretch of river for these retreats. So the Maine Salmon in Idaho, and
Nice.
just the opportunity to bring women into these deep wilderness experiences together, to tune into their feminine power, rediscover their creative wisdom, and celebrate sisterhood, and laugh and play a lot, are primarily what Downriver Divas is all about.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much in there. So you said, the whitewater rafting excursions is is all you do right now, but there's so
Mhm.
much that happens in that. And it's so cool. Let's talk first about the physical experience. You said it's the main salmon in Idaho. So tell us about that river. How long is it? How long are you on the river?
Yeah. So it's 6 days, 5 nights. We go, camp to camp down the river. What I love about the main salmon is there are these big, beautiful sandy beaches, a lot of the camps, and it's really wooded. You see lots of osprey and bald eagles, and
Cool.
the whitewater is exciting, but not, especially in August.
Uh-huh.
The water's at a pretty tame level. So it's not about like the knuckle gripping adventure. It's more about deep immersion in nature, and um, especially for women, I feel like it's about releasing the societal expectations that we can feel back in the civilized world.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, and realigning to the pace of nature, the rhythms of nature, um, the wisdom of nature. It's just naturally occurs over 6 days.
Yeah. And I love this. So how long is that stretch of river?
I think 80 miles is the stretch.
Okay. And then just for people that like terminology and like for context, like what
Yeah.
like the class system, how would you equate what kind of rapids you guys are
There are a
getting to?
couple of class 4 rapids on this
Okay.
river, primarily 2 and 3.
Okay.
Yep, and
All
it
right. And
is
then
flow dependent. So in August, I'd say most of those rapids are class 3.
got it. Okay. And so when you go on these trips, how many people are you typically taking?
I try to limit the groups to 18 at the very most. I've
Okay.
kind of found like 12 to 14 is a sweet spot. Um, and that doesn't include the guides, so sometimes we have up to 5 guides.
Got it. Okay. So 18 participants and then up to 5 guides. And then so how much of the day are you on the water and what are your I'm going to say accommodations like
Yeah,
in the evening? Because I did read a little bit on your website some of the FAQs about camping and what that's like and kind of creating that image for people. So
right. Um, I think we spend most of the day on the river. We might stop for a hike, or we always stop for lunch, and
mhm.
the food is incredible on these trips. And I especially women who are brand new to camping, I always tell them this is the perfect entry point because it's not like backpacking where you can barely bring anything.
Yeah,
Um, raft Rafts can carry a lot, and so there's always a camp chair circle set up. There's these really cushy sleeping mats. There's yeah, the camp stove is like super substantial, and you have like I eat better than I do at home for sure. Um, and we bring like bottles of wine and margarita mix, and you don't have to drink, but that's certainly available. Um, it's comfortable, and it's really fun because there's kind of a set area that the campsite is every night, and so it becomes your kind of home and space, and often it's quite warm, and so we spend a lot of time floating in the river, in and out of the water a lot.
yeah, I love it. And one thing, like I noticed on your website, I mean, it's just a good point, and you said it. Like with backpacking, there's a limited amount of stuff that you can bring, but these are sizable rafts, so you have enough room for gear to make your camps comfortable.
Absolutely, and I always urge women to like show their style in camp. Like camp clothes can be like a really cute sundress or flowy pants and your favorite crop top, but it doesn't have to be like only bring your neoprene and thermal underwear. It's, again, especially in August, we have the availability to feel a really fun summer vibe, and
Yeah.
there's hardly any mosquito. I've rarely felt like there's much to worry about in
Yeah.
camp.
Yeah. So I want to get into, so there's clearly like the physical experience that people are going to go through, and a sense of accomplishment that they feel through this whole experience. And then there's like, a whole nother side of this, whether it's the bonding and the inner experience that they go through. And I want to touch on all of that. But before we do that, I think it would be really helpful just to talk about the people that go. And specifically, you've chosen to do this for women only. And I'd love if we could just kind of talk about that, and what inspired you to create this for women only. And yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah, I think the original inspiration for me was that I felt disconnected from kind of a tribe and community of women. I have two daughters who are 2 years apart, and then a 6-year spread to my third daughter. And with my first two daughters, I had this amazing group of moms, and we did everything together. And I felt really connected to kind of the way motherhood is supposed to be. Like, we do this in community. And
Mm,
when my third daughter was born, I didn't have a young community of mothers around me. And I do think as a society, we've replaced, like I say on my website, long hugs with texting emojis. Like, we
true.
think we're connecting on a day-to-day basis through
Yeah.
texts, and it's not the same. I mean, there's research out there that we need physical touch. We need to see one another
Mhm.
and laugh together. So it's creating that, reconnecting to that community. And also, I think a lot of women are introduced in the past to the outdoors through a male figure, like a father or a boyfriend, and
Mhm.
and that can be wonderful. It's just often different energy, though. I think there can be some kind of sense of danger and fear and conquering nature, and it's not about that at all. And these trips are really about upliftment and camaraderie. And if a woman comes like through a rapid and an inflatable kayak, we're all cheering for her. And it's about the celebration um, of one another, and really seeing each other and supporting each other.
Yeah. So do you feel like the male element brings in like this level of like competition that's not there with a group of women? Is that a fair?
Yeah, I think unfortunately that can happen. It doesn't have to, but
Yeah.
I didn't even think about this, but when I was a raft guide in
Yeah.
like the 90s, I had an experience where I was one of like two females at the guiding company I worked for.
Mhm.
And I had this experience on a multi-day trip where the men, and again, I want to be careful because I consider my husband a really balanced male, and I
Yeah.
can tell you are too. It's not just balanced in your female and male
Yeah,
energies,
yeah.
but there's a group of men, male guides, who kind of made a sport one night of seeing who could be the first to make me cry. And
Mm.
it was torturous, and I didn't know what was going on. And eventually, of course, I peeled off and cried in the woods.
Wow.
And it was later revealed to me that that was like the sport of the evening. And I carried that story with me because
Yeah.
yeah, it was a bit of bullying, and it was that negative, and it can happen from women too. I've
Yeah.
had female trip leaders who are quite intense and demanding.
Mhm.
And I just don't think that belongs in nature. I think it's about fluency and grace and honoring this amazing interconnectedness to nature, where we are nature. Like the water in the river also supports our bodies, and the minerals in the canyons and the rocks, our bones are made up of the same minerals. There's no disconnect. There's no conquering of. It's just being in the awe and the reverence and the interconnected state. And I feel like female raft guides have that nailed. There's a really beautiful fluency of, I'm not conquering this rapid. I'm working with the water, and it's like a graceful dance.
It's so beautiful, and I'm getting chills here because we on this podcast I've asked many guests about one of my favorite words, awe, and you just said it.
I love that word too.
I do too, and I haven't brought it up in a few episodes, but I love the Oxford language definition, which is a feeling of reverential respect mixed with fear or wonder. And I think I heard you say reverence and awe together, and that just triggered, like, I want to talk about that word. So yeah, what does awe mean to you?
Well, oh, I love that word too. And I love reverence and awe together.
Yeah.
So it's fun to reflect back. When I first was a raft guide and kayaker, I think I was more connected to kind of the fear-based adventure. Like, I remember getting out and staring at rapids and just only seeing what could go wrong. I turned 50 this summer, and I just love this space that I'm in my life where I can get out. Like, we do a lot of family rafting, and some of the same rapids I've gotten out now with my daughters to scout them. And I'm like, wow, the geology is amazing around here. Or I can like spend hours looking at the exoskeleton of like a salmon fly. And the intricate detail that's available, like the more we connect to that awe and wonder and reverence of nature, the better we feel. And I think it comes with age, but I really try to model it for my daughters. Like, look at the snow crystals glittering in the sunlight this morning as I drive them to school. Just gratitude and awe for.
Why do you think that is? You said the more we connect with the nature, the more we are essentially connecting with ourselves, is what I think I heard you say.
I think it's this. I've heard Eckhart Tolle talk about like the same energy that animates a wildflower is the same energy that animates us. And it's connecting to that wisdom of oneness. Like, we are not separate from this environment. We are the same molecules, atoms, matter, and life force. And when you feel that connectedness, you just feel safe and supported by the universe, rather than, yeah, this is a place I need to conquer. This is a place I need to resource. It's there because we are connected to it.
Yeah. And you said a feeling of being safe and supported. And I think, kind of going back to what we just talked about a few minutes ago, it's not about the conquering. It's not about like the competition of winning a race or beating the river. It is about being in nature and that feeling of being safe and supported. And it feels to me like that's what you're trying to create for these women.
Absolutely. And to be honest, Scott, I don't create it. We just come together in that setting, and that's the energy that's present. I mean, I think I help set it up and create a space where one can feel vulnerable and supported. But the female guide crews love these trips because they're really excited to be with an all-female crew and connected to that energy. And there's been times where we've had to like set up a big kind of tarp in the middle of a rainstorm, and they all laugh after about how fluently it went. Like, women are just kind of attuned to like things get done and it's not a big deal.
Yeah. So yes. And in creating that safe and supported environment, you're still in nature, you're still in the wild. And just by virtue of like where you are,
Yeah.
there is a high degree of uncertainty. There is a high degree, and I'm sure that, there are at least moments during the experience that your participants feel fear.
Absolutely. And I think that's really important for me to remember, like to meet people where they're at, because I'm so comfortable in those environments. To remember, like with a beginner's mind, what it felt like in the beginning.
Yeah.
But I really feel like this sense of protection that we create with this supportive, nurturing, playful female energy out there. And I've said that many times, like I truly just feel like these trips are protected. Like we're honoring the energy, the female energy of the planet.
Yeah. What I'm envisioning here is a group of women that are like super connected, super supportive of each other. But again, like to come back to like, when you're going on, and some of your participants have never rafted before, is that right?
Right.
And maybe some have never camped before. So this element of uncertainty maybe is creating some inner fear, but they're surrounded by people that want to help them get through that, right? So isn't there an element of this where there is that struggle of like facing down your own fear, but having this group of people that are right there with you to help you get through it?
Absolutely. Gosh, I really can't remember the last time the last retreat I did, I kayaked
Uh-huh.
rather than rode as a on a raft. And I'd never kayaked this stretch of river. So there was some fear in me. But I was with three other guests who were kayaking, and then some women get in the inflatable rafts or kayaks for some of the rapids. And yeah, it's like there's an ease that comes from speaking to our fear too. I think women aren't afraid to say, I'm a little nervous about this rapid.
Yeah.
And to come through and be like, you nailed it. That was amazing.
Yes.
Um, so connecting to that support and not being afraid to voice how you're feeling.
Yeah.
And instead of, I do think there's an old paradigm of like, put your head down and just get through it.
Hmm.
And that's not what it's about. It's about seeking support and receiving nurturing support and guidance.
Yeah. And so I'm imagining like that first day on the water. And I'm imagining like after you finished your first full day on the water, like what that, you've gotten out of the water, you finished, maybe hit some rapids, like what the kind of general feeling of the group is and what's going on with the group, like that evening.
Well, to be honest, the first thing we often do is like a celebratory swim.
Yeah.
And sometimes we like strip down and go swimming.
Yeah. Yeah.
You get really comfortable with just your body out there. And we'll grab a celebratory beverage and float in the eddy and talk about the day.
There's a freedom, right? I mean, there was a sense of accomplishment that came at the end of the day, and like now it's time to celebrate. Like, is there? So I mean, like there's a metaphor with that too, like stripping down and like getting in the water, and like what gets shed on that first night, aside from clothing, right? Like there's other stuff that there's other stuff that gets released and shed in that.
Yeah. It's like yeah, you start to let go of, I think, what can tie us to stress in a civilized society.
Yeah.
Like driving around in our cars and constantly having to respond to a device that's buzzing on our body. Or the demands of like your job or your children or your dog. the release of that and the coming home to, wow, this is what it feels like just to be in my body and free of those kind of societal pressures.
So does that freedom feeling build over the course of the 6 days?
Absolutely. Yeah. Women are just glowing at the end of the retreats, and they bring that energy back home. It can be a slower release for some than others, but definitely by the end,
Yeah,
we've all
and so, I mean, all of that letting go, accumulated over time, right? And it's been released, so when you go back to the real world and all of the responsibilities, like, what's been your experience with your participants in terms of, like, does that stuff just all come back, or are they able to bring what they learned on the river into their life just to get a little bit more of that sort of feeling of freedom in their regular lives?
I think both and, I know for myself, probably a few months after the retreat, I just feel like I'm glowing, I'm in so much gratitude and joy, um, and we go out to dinner post-retreat, and everyone, like, cleans up, and it's just this, like, everywhere we go, people are like, What's up with that group?" This is, like, freedom and, joy and connectedness,
Yeah.
but yeah, eventually the stress is gonna be there and it's gonna, resurface, and so it's like having reminders. I have a retreat photographer come on every trip,
Yeah.
because I don't want women to bring their phones, and she puts together an insanely beautiful gallery of photos. So I always tell women, like, keep this close to your heart. Keep these photos in your phone, and reconnect to the energy when you're feeling disconnected, and reach out. We create contact lists, and a lot of women become longtime friends
Yeah.
and know that they're there to support one another.
I mean, to me, any experiences you have in nature, it's always, if it doesn't matter who you're with, like whoever you're with, like there's a bonding that happens, and you come home and you're like, you just feel connected with those people. I mean, really for life.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm curious, like, are there any like key lessons or takeaways from the river and from these trips that people specifically could use back in daily life? Like just even something to remember, like, when you're feeling the stress of mommy martyrdom that you called it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, nature is all around us, even if you live in a city. You can find those spaces, and I really believe that taking time to connect and reattune to the pace of nature, and to be in awe and wonder is available to us at any time. So slowing down and even just examining a a tree growing in the sidewalk. Nature's really there to remind us that of this interconnectedness.
Yeah. So you mentioned Eckhart Tolle, and I mean, The Power of Now is one of my favorite books. I mean, that's all about just like being present, and to me, it's like that's what nature is all about. Is it helps connect us back to that place of just being fully present.
Yeah, and I love A New Earth. I could listen to him, like, recite that book over and over because
You
there's so
do
much.
have to listen to his voice because his voice is
Yeah.
it's such a different
His
experience when
voice,
you listen versus just
right.
reading it.
Yeah, I agree. Um, I feel like that book opened me up to a lot of, I think often we're unconsciously connecting to this in nature. And it's just for me been in the past maybe 10 years that I'm consciously aware. I can observe how what I'm experiencing can be deepened, and how it can bring me to that place of oneness.
Yeah. And I love you just said that you think that that connection with nature is often unconscious, but
Mhm.
for you in the last 10 years, it's become more conscious. Do you remember like when that sort of transition happened for you?
That's a great question. Remember when my first daughter was born, like this, oh my God, this is like, we are wondrous beings. Just that woke me up a lot to just the awe and wonder of this human journey.
Yeah.
But nature specifically, the time through lockdown was really valuable for me. We live on 5 acres, we're on the river. So my daughters and I were outside a lot and we were down at the riverbank, just like my now 10-year-old and I would like make little boats out of twigs and leaves. And that was some of there was a lot of opportunity. I'm grateful that this is where I was during that time. But it slowed me down and really put me into that hyper focus state of, wow, I've never been to this corner of the property and there's so much to see here.
I love that. I actually had COVID was kind of a similar experience for me too. We did a backpacking trip in the summer of 2021, kind of at like, after the the main push of the pandemic. But I think it is interesting, like you said, that it's unconscious for so many of us until it becomes conscious. And for me, it's like yes, I've always connected with nature, but like at some point you do go, like you do make that connection. And it's like, wait a minute, because that's what happened to me. We were on this backpacking trip and I was watching the sunset over a lake in the middle of nowhere. And I was just like, whoa, like this is my happy place.
Yes. Oh, you just reminded me of another moment. And this is actually back in like my 20s. And I call them like nature epiphanies.
I love that. Nature epiphanies. Yeah.
I was I had the great fortune to do this Tibetan studies program for a semester. I studied abroad, and at the end of that, I trekked through the Annapurna circuit in Nepal. And one time I got off the track, and I was a little bit lost. And I looked down, and all these stones that I overturned were like a cephalopodic spiral. And I was like, oh my gosh, this mountain was under the ocean at one point. And then the clouds parted and I could see the bigger peaks. And it was one of those moments of like time and space and connection were all one. And just, yeah, the Grand Canyon is another place of that recognition for me. Like our existence is minuscule in relation to this planet's existence. And really the opportunity is to be in awe and reverence of this planet we get to inhabit.
There's not much of a better feeling than that.
No, no
Oh,
better place than the Grand Canyon to connect to that.
yes. Yes. Oh man. So this is incredible. And I'm curious, like, could you share? I mean, I know that in this whole journey that you've taken, you have to have seen like stories of transformation. Could you share with us some of the transformations that you've witnessed as as part of this, as the leader of these trips?
Absolutely. One story I love is a woman who came on a retreat on the Rogue River in Oregon. And as part of that curriculum, I was asking women to connect to what they desire before
Mhm.
the trip. And I was crazy to discover a lot of women didn't even know like what
Mm.
their needs and desires were. And this woman in particular just felt she was a therapist and she felt really disconnected from her own needs. And she identified um, this limiting belief she'd been carrying that others' needs are more important than my own. Um, And so throughout the course of the trip, we just kept connecting to this idea of what you desire. And
Yeah.
it emerged for her that she'd always wanted to be a helicopter pilot, like from the time
What?
she was like 5 years old. And she's like, I just never thought that was available to me, but it's a true desire living inside of me. And when she got home, she took the steps to become a helicopter pilot.
What? That's crazy. That's awesome.
That's one
What
of
is
my
that? What's that like for you?
Oh, so rewarding. And I mean, she's inspiring. I don't think I realized someone could reattune that deeply. Like I do think so often I guide people to look at, like, what did you want to be when you were little? Because I think we really know our desires at that stage of life, and we kind of become disconnected.
How does that happen? Can you walk us through that?
Oh, geez.
The disconnection? I mean, you
Yeah.
just said, like, I just heard you say, like, we know what we want when we're kids, and then we become disconnected from it. How does that happen?
I think it's the same energy. We do a lot of like watercoloring on my retreats, and so many women really judge themselves as being bad artists. And I'm like, think back to when you were a child, and like, children are all amazing artists. And same thing, like I think we start to inherit stories of judgment from ourselves and others, and they become this barrier to just the knowing and the love that we are born into this world with. And for myself, the opportunity to, I was a student at the University of Santa Monica studying spiritual psychology, and that
Yeah.
guided me through the process of reconnecting to those fears and judgments and barriers to love, and releasing them. And I do think that's also why at this stage in my life, I'm starting to reconnect to how I felt as a child.
Well, also, I know that play is very important. As we're talking about being a child, like, you incorporate play on these trips. So can you
Yeah.
speak to that a little bit?
It just emerges, but we do have, for example, one way we connect to play is I have this really beautiful, sparkly, stretchy belt that gets passed from retreat guest to retreat guest. If you receive it from someone, you get to wear it for the day. And that in and of itself is playful. It's kind of like this Jane Fonda-esque sparkly
Nice.
belt.
Cool.
And your task when you receive the belt is to share with the group a playful activity. So we've had women like teach a fun song, or we've like done somersaults in the water. Like, think back to when you were young and when you felt like freedom and play.
Yeah, what are some of your favorite things to do?
Oh, geez. We've had someone, this is so funny, but my retreat last summer, this woman brought up, like, I used to spend hours in the pool with my friend, and we would hold hands and connect our feet and then raise up and touch bums. And so we all tried that in a deep eddy, and you're just laughing so hard because it's totally awkward, but it does like bring you back to your childhood. And when you actually pull it off, you're just in so much celebration. And
Yeah.
we're all witnessing each other trying this like butt bump move in the eddy.
The butt bump brings laughter, and laughter brings
Yeah,
release.
absolutely. And I do think we get really serious in society, and we're all meant to laugh and play and connect to that playful, silly joy, I call it. It's natural, and it's freeing.
Yeah. It sounds super fun. Like, I wanna come. So that's my next question. Like, do you ever get, I'm gonna say, dudes that say, "Aimee, I wanna come"?
Yes. So especially a lot of husbands and partners are like, I want to do that trip.
Yeah.
And they are the biggest supporters of my trips
Uh-huh.
because women come home just so alive. And I say a lot that like you're gonna see the woman you married come back home, you know?
That's awesome. I love that.
um I I haven't had anyone that's all kind of in jest,
Uh-huh.
but I do think there's opportunities for especially like connecting to the play and joy for men too. Because I think a lot of what's available in the outdoors and also valuable, but kind of about like initiation and that manhood has to be this initiation, but it's also men should be connecting to a sense of nurturing one another and supporting one another and playful, silly joy, which I think probably emerges anyway on all male trips, but I've never been on one.
Oh man, I love it. Well, yeah, this is awesome. So I'm curious, like for women that are listening to this and are intrigued, inspired, but are like, oh, I don't know if I could go do that. Like, what advice do you have?
Oh, I think I'd say adventure in the outdoors is not something to fear because as we've spoken to throughout this conversation, nature is not something outside of you to conquer. So there's nothing to fear. And it's all about the inner journey and learning to ask for help, receive love and support, and this incredible opportunity to connect deeper to awe and wonder and a digital cleanse.
The digital cleanse is
We all
very
need that
important.
more and more.
Yeah.
Mm.
And like for the resistance, for that resistance that they might be feeling, like what's the best way for somebody to get over that resistance and say yes to your adventure?
I don't feel like I work too hard to convince people who are strongly resistant because I think they'll find this in their own time. It was more women who are on the fence. I just speak to how they'll feel after the trip
Mm,
and connecting to that energy and the opportunity to reimagine your life from a new perspective. And we all deserve that. And that it's not uncomfortable. And can show you images of another guest I had was 79 and she'd never been camping in her entire
awesome.
life.
Love that.
And she was just radiant and glowing and she had so much wisdom to impart. And I just have this vision burned in my mind of her floating around the eddy and laughing. And, it's available to anyone in there are things that can go wrong day to day as well.
Yeah.
You could it's very rare, but you could be bitten by a rattlesnake on one of these trips. It's
Mhm.
never happened on my watch. But you could also be bitten by a spider in your home. Like that's probably the same risk.
That's right. I mean, you can get in your car and get in an accident,
Yeah, that's even
this
higher risk.
afternoon. I mean, yes. So what I'm hearing you say is not a lot of convincing needed when you know you know. And
Yeah.
that's a great way to finish because one things we talk about on this podcast is the voice inside that calls us to adventure.
Mm. Yeah. And it's for me in my life, the greatest events have occurred through just spontaneity, letting go of what society has told me I need to do and listening to what I feel. And whether that's having children or going down the Grand Canyon, those spontaneous leaps into adventure, even like public speaking,
Mhm.
have had the greatest reward. And that's the gift of adventure.
Yeah, Aimee, what you're doing is so incredible. You are inspiring so many people, and you're doing it in these small groups, and it just makes it intimate, and you're like creating the space for people to be able to make connection, and it's amazing. And fact of the matter is, Hollywood's going to find out about you,
No, right.
and at some point, they're going to make a movie about your life. And so I want to know, when they do, who's going to be the Hollywood actress that's going to play you?
I love this question. So often throughout my life, I've been likened to Sally Field.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah, and I really like her. I think she's like in her 70s, and she still has like this youthful vibrance, and she looks very natural. She doesn't look pinched and puckered. She's
Awesome. I love that. Yeah.
naturally Sally Field, and yeah.
How cool. Okay. What's your movie going to be called?
Oh, In Search of Awe and Reverence.
Oh, speaking my language, starring Sally Field. I'm going. That's an Oscar winner right there. I love that. Okay, Aimee, you have a retreat this summer.
I do.
Do you still have some space?
I do. Yes, I have about 5 more spots.
Okay. So if somebody wants to go on a rafting trip with you, or say they just want to find out more about you, ask you questions, what's the best way for people to get a hold of you?
So I have a website, downriverdivas.com, and there's contact info on there. My email is amy@downriverdivas.com, and my phone number is on there as well, which,
perfect.
As a busy mom, I always say, text me.
Yeah, I gotcha. Downriverdivas.com. It's a great website. Go there just to watch the promo video and look at some of the photos.
The Moana song.
Like, just the photos alone will get you inspired to want to go on one of these trips. Aimee, this has been so much fun. I really appreciate the time. For those listening, I hope you've been inspired today as much as I have. Hope that Aimee's story has encouraged you to listen to the voice inside that calls you to adventure, because we want to hear your story next. If you have a story to tell, or you just need a nudge to create one, please send me an email. We'd also appreciate it if you'd help us spread the word by leaving a review and sharing or tagging Inspire Campfire in your social media. And until next time, I want to encourage you to get outside. Thank you for listening. Aimee, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Scott. This was really fun.